All right, let's get to it. Welcome, class, to Classics 160B1, Meet the Ancients. I, of course, am your professor, Dr. Rob Steffen, and today we are going to continue our story of the late Roman Republic. And what we saw last time, right, was that even though Rome was booming in so many ways, there are these little kind of structural problems that might cause big structural problems later on. So we are going to kind of start to see today how those little bitty issues begin to explode. So let's go ahead and bring down the lights, bring down the projector, fire this thing up, and lecture 11.1. It's not a lecture 11.1. It's lecture 11.2. Who's putting these slides together? Anyway, it's lecture 11.2. And this is the beginning of the Civil War, right? It should be titled Civil War Begins. Thank you, Harry, for the condolences. Rough game last night, but I hope everybody did watch the Arizona Wildcat women. And we are going to the Final Four, which is awesome. I think that game's Friday night, so enjoy your day off on Friday and watch the Wildcats then. Okay. So, lecture 11.2, just imagine this says 11.2, Civil War begins. Alright, what we're going to do today, we're going to start with a few announcements. Then we are going to recap Roman imperialism, kind of how Rome grew from this little piddly thing to this giant, massive, imposing thing. We're going to talk about the Gracchi. We left off with Tiberius last time, and so we'll kind of recap on him and then get into his younger brother Gaius Gracchus. And then we are going to see civil war erupt with two of the most important figures from the ancient Roman Republic, Gaius Marius, the people's general, and Lucius Cornelius Sulla, leader of the Optimates. Nicholas, I was going to have us meet for the honors thing today after class, but I had another faculty meeting type thing pop up exactly at 1. So what we're going to do is, don't worry about that after class today. You guys can just go your separate ways. And next week we'll hit it hard, all right? And we'll actually do the meeting within Engage next week. Okay, so in terms of announcements, what do we actually have for today? You guys know the deal. Put the thing in speaker view. If you have a question, try to direct that to your TA. They can funnel that to me, and that way I don't get sidetracked, even though I'm going to get sidetracked anyway. We all know this is going to happen. It's fine. Your revised research proposal is due a week from Friday, okay? So that thing should be started by now. Hopefully you've taken it over to the Writing Skills Improvement Program or the Think Tank Writing Center, gotten some feedback on that. If you do, email your TA, and you will get a bump on your grade for this thing. As well, the real reward there is you're going to become a better writer. And I know, everybody's sitting around thinking, I want to become a better writer. And if you are, so it's an admirable thing. It's very important to be a good writer. So build up those skills, get some extra credit. You're going to be in good shape there. Other announcements that don't show up on the slide for some magical reason. Embargo, yeah. I think I mentioned this last time. If you guys get 100% on this thing, right? If Zach's reading your paper and he is like, this is God's gift to scholarship. This is incredible, right? 100%. And you've taken it there, boom, 105. We'll make that happen. Right? It's not easy to get 100, but if you do, we will bump it up. Other announcements.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
The word count is the same for groups and individual students for the graph, right?
Yeah, I think I said 5 different things on that and then never really committed to any of them. That sounds like something I would do.
Yeah. We have said 750 words.
Yeah, so it's 750 for an individual. What do we think sounds fair? Can we get some feedback from the students? Considering we're in the Roman Republic, the people have a voice. What do the students have to say here? 100? 100 words? What does that even mean? 100 extra words? 1,000 words? 750 per person? All right, so, okay. no, not 100 in total. That's 650 less than a single person would have to write. Okay. All right. What do we think about 750 plus 250 per extra? I've seen that a couple times. 150 doesn't seem to be like quite enough. That seems to be a pretty big discount if you got like 4 people. All right. Let it be so. Karen, Zach, Blake, if you're out there, does that sound fair? Does that sound overly demanding? You guys are a little bit closer to being in their position than I am.
I think it's fair.
Karen, what do you think? All right, so 750 is the minimum, right? If it's just you writing it, you got to write 750. If you have a group of 2, you got to write your 750 plus another 250. Yeah, it does set like, you know. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Well, you know, here's the great thing, right? That if you worked individually and you wrote all 750 of those words yourself, think about how much more you got to improve than everybody else, right? That's like a wonderful opportunity for you. All right, so we are going with 750 plus 250 for each extra person. All right, let it be so. Karen, would you mind, like, during class today, writing an email to the class announcing that? And actually, you know what would be great? I've got a couple other announcements that's not on the slide that I should put in there.
Okay.
Harry, you know if people are just going to get into your group and try to mooch off your words, you know that's going to happen. Don't let that happen. Those are your words. Okay. So, other announcements, no class on Friday, right? That is a reading day. Your revised research proposal, due a week from Friday. Your reading response for this week is not due Friday because that's a reading day. You guys should be relaxing. I don't know, it's very nice and sunny outside. Go outside, get a tan, do whatever you guys do. Sunday night for that. And no class on Friday, and also no class on Monday. I'm going to be traveling on Monday. So Karen, can you throw the no class on Friday and Monday in there? Yeah, Jorge, that's great. Yeah, hit the ocean on Friday. That's an excellent plan. I'm going to be traveling on Monday during our normal class. So here's the deal, okay? You don't have to be anywhere synchronously. I'm giving everybody their attendance, participation credit for the day, right? I'm just going to go in and everybody's going to get that. There is a lecture that's up there. It's 29 minutes long. Make yourself like some popcorn or like order yourself a pizza and watch this. It is on the early life of Gaius Julius Caesar. We have made it to that point where we get to talk about Julius Caesar, which is awesome. So watch that because on Wednesday of next week, we're going to be talking about the Gallic Wars, right? Kind of after his early life when he sets out for Gaul and starts just murdering people like crazy. If you take one perspective. Another perspective is he's a very successful general, expanding Rome's power and influence and bringing culture to the masses. Depends which way you look at it. Okay, so no class Friday, no class Monday. Watch the lecture on Monday. Lauren, that's a great question. It is available now. If you go to Monday's class, there's like a little, like lecture link. And if you click it, it should take you to the lecture. Sometimes you have to scroll up to the top of the page to see the lecture. But you should be able to see it now. All right. I think those are all the announcements for now. Let's see where we left off with Roman imperialism. All right. Here's our map, right? We've got to see the date here. It is 133 BC. That's what we're moving towards. All right, 264, Rome defeats Volsini, right? Modern Orvieto, and they become the dominant power in Italy, right? And then over the next 131 years, right, they expand that power from being the dominant power in Italy to being the dominant power in the Mediterranean, right? With Sicily and Sardinia and Corsica and Spain and like parts of southern France and a lot of Greece and Macedon and Western Asia Minor and Africa, right? 130 years. Rome's really doing quite well for themselves. And this is like not quite the same thing as we saw early in the semester. Remember early in the semester when we talked about like the Persians and like the Assyrians and the different empires like way off the map over here? Where? Over here? Even further east than that? Right? Remember that kind of deal was like somebody kind of put it together and then you'd have like one group win one battle and then they'd just take over the entire empire. Rome's doing all kinds of stuff to put this thing together, right? Remember, in the East, the way this works is they fight large battles. And it has been shown that the Roman legions are superior to the Greek phalanxes. And they're able to win some big battles against the successor kingdoms, right? The successors of Alexander, and incorporate some of these regions. But over here in the West, right, especially in Spain, in northern Italy and in Gaul, they don't have those like big state level societies to fight against. It's all these little tribes. And you would think that would be easier, but actually it's a huge pain in Rome's ass to try to actually go fight each one of these little tribes individually, especially when the tribes don't really want to fight and they just hide in the hills. And then at night they come down and they kill a few people and they disrupt your trade networks and that sort of thing. So Rome has really patchworked this whole thing together and done it themselves rather than just winning kind of one large battle. Now, a couple of the results of that, right, of all this conquest are one, Roman farms get way bigger. We get these things called latifundia, which are kind of sort of like plantations, where you have a huge kind of complex here, and then you've got a huge area of surrounding farmland, and it's worked by slaves that are brought into this region through conquest. So when we talk about slavery in the Greco-Roman world, it's not race-based slavery. It's slavery that's based on kind of power differentials that come out of military conquest, right? And so what that means is over the course of this 130 years, as Rome's just going all over the place, there's a huge influx of unpaid labor coming into Italy. And so the rich are buying up land and people. And that means those other farmers, right? The little like kind of family farmers. Good old Cincinnatus, remember that guy? Right? They're kind of selling their land to these richer people. They are becoming unemployed because they can't compete in the marketplace with their little farm, and they're moving into cities. And as a result, cities are growing, right? We'll talk about Pompeii a little bit later in the course. You gotta go to Pompeii. It's so cool, right? This is like one of the little shops and bars there. The bars in Pompeii just look like normal bars. They got this like bar top, it's like covered in marble, you got a place for your food and your drinks. Really, really kind of cool stuff. But these cities are becoming very overcrowded with people who don't own land. And that's a big problem. The not owning land, right, is a big problem because you have to own land to be in the army. We'll see that come up later today. And then we see in terms of kind of social hierarchies, things are changing. Patricians and plebs, that was the big thing in the early republic. Now we're switching to the populares and the optimates, right? Go write those names down. Populares, the regular people. Optimates literally translates as the best people, really the richest people, right? And that's the new kind of social clash. So even though the names are new, the battle between the haves and the have-nots, between the aristocrats and the regular people, it's still kind of sort of the same battle. Now, one of the other things that we see is that as Rome grows larger in terms of its power, right, politics is becoming more and more competitive, right? All of a sudden, you have a lot riding on the fact, like, if you can become consul, there's like a lot you can like, a lot of money you can make from all these provinces. There's a lot of glory you can win with your huge armies against new enemies, right? There's quite a lot at stake. And as a result, the kind of competition to get those highest offices, remember, there's only 2 consuls at any given time. But the competition to get that, it is becoming really, really heated. And the people who do get those positions are becoming like crazy powerful, right? So we got Scipio Africanus here, right? Like adding things to his name, becoming known as the like Scipio the Conqueror of Africa, and then being able to start using that power to massage the rules a little bit, right? So normally you'd have to become consul, right, in Rome before you're proconsul, kind of like a governor of one of the provinces. But Scipio's like, I'm Scipio Africanus. I defeated Hannibal, so I'm just going to do that anyway, even though I haven't been consul. So people are starting to, mess around a little bit with the political rules. And then we also see Rome running into this thing, right, where their kind of military superiority is at odds with their cultural inferiority, right? They get over into the Greek East and they see all this amazing architecture and literature and sculpture and all this really, really cool stuff. And they start merging their own culture with Greek culture, becoming kind of more Greek through this process of conquest. All right, so we closed last time talking about this dude, Tiberius Gracchus, right? Rome's at its peak, but a couple problems, right? We're getting a lot of people not owning land anymore. They're becoming unemployed in these cities. And that's a problem because you have to own land to be in the army. And generally just unemployment is not a very good thing. And so good old Tiberius Gracchus, the tribune of the plebs, his solution to this is to propose a new bill, right? To basically take a bunch of public land, chop it up, and give it to these people who no longer have land, right? And this is something that the regular people of Rome are like, well, that's awesome. What a great piece of legislation. And the rich people in Rome are like, no, don't take our land and give it to other people. And so Tiberius comes up with this strategy where he like reads the rule book on exactly how laws are passed, right? He's got his textbook on how a bill becomes a law. And what he does is he decides, I'm not even messing with the Senate on this one. I know the Senate's not going to like it. They can't legally vote to overturn it. So I'm taking this thing straight to the people. So he takes this thing straight to the people who overwhelmingly support it, right? And the bill passes. Now, the strategy that the senators then have is that they allocate very, very little money to actually fund this process. And so Tiberius gets this idea. 133 is the exact year that the kingdom of Pergamon, right, which you see over here, is bequeathed to Rome. And he's like, well, let's use all the money from Pergamon to fund this kind of new bill that's been passed. And people start talking and they're like, he wants to use like an entire kingdom just for his own purposes? Like that's sounding an awful lot like a king. And then he wants to run for tribune a second time. And they get out their rule book and they read their rule book and they're like, well, that's not totally illegal, but it is kind of unusual. And in the process of kind of going up for election this second time, their mobs collide, right? The supporters of Tiberius collide with the supporters of the Senate. And in the process of this, people are breaking benches and they're using pieces of these benches to beat each other. And Tiberius Gracchus is beaten to death in the kind of process of trying to run for a second year as tribune of the plebs. Okay, so he's beaten to death, his body's thrown into a river, and his younger brother, 10 years later, takes over. Okay, so we closed with that question last time. What do we make of this dude? Is he like a man of the people, right? Is he like a great guy trying to fight for the regular person with his land legislation? Or do you think that he really wants that kind of glory and power, and that using the regular people is just a new strategy that he's developed for trying to get it? So think about that as you're moving forward, because his younger brother's going to do the exact same thing, but on a way bigger scale. All right, so Gaius Gracchus, the younger brother of Tiberius, is the tribune of the plebs 10 years later. So in 123, Tiberius is 133, Gaius is 123 BCE. Now, one of the amazing things is that after Tiberius dies, the land bill, people actually start to agree that it was a pretty good idea. In large part because of this army issue, right? That you have to have people who own land to be in the army because that's like an old rule from the earlier part of the Roman Republic. And tens of thousands of people are resettled on land as part of this legislation. And so they get about 20,000 new troops for the army. So kind of weird. After this whole chaos and being beaten to death and thrown in a river, his legislation actually does move forward. Okay, so Gaius is the younger brother of Tiberius, and he ends up having the same position, right? He's the same kind of role of tribune of the plebs. And he's got similar kind of goals here in terms of helping the regular people, but he wants to go beyond just this kind of land reform that his older brother wanted to do. And he starts thinking of other ways or other things that might make him very popular with the people of Rome. And with Gaius, we're going to ask that exact same question, right? Keep thinking of this. Are we seeing somebody who is a great reformer, right? And an advocate of the regular person? Or are we seeing somebody who's power hungry, who has come up with a new kind of strategy for gaining that power? Or is it both? And can you have both? Okay, so one of the things that Gaius does for the regular people is he starts building roads. He's investing tons of money and labor into roads to connect different towns and to connect Rome to all these different towns, right? If you've ever heard the phrase, all roads lead to Rome, Gaius Gracchus is one of the reasons why that's a thing. And then you start thinking, right? For one, why is this important? One, it's great for the economy, right? When goods travel easier and cheaper and smoother, right? That's better for people because they become more affordable. Things can get places faster and cheaper, and you have better markets that way. And then you start thinking about other reasons why Gaius might be doing this, and you're like, oh, well, this just happens to help kind of those poor regular farmers and people in neighboring towns who are citizens. It helps them get to Rome to vote, right? So previously, people who may not have been able to vote because of logistical reasons can now use Gaius Gracchus's awesome new roads to get to the city and vote, kind of helping him out there. So, Gaius Gracchus, the road builder. Next thing we see him start to deal with a food issue, right? So Rome is booming, right? People are coming into the city. There's all this influx of people from the countryside as their farms are bought up. And there's huge fluctuations in prices of food staples. Because Rome's fighting all the time, right? Sometimes they've just won a big war. There's a lot of grain. Things are very cheap. Other times, Rome's at war. It's tough to get grain, and it's very expensive to eat. And if you're a regular person, right, living right at the subsistence level, maybe a little bit higher than the subsistence level, that's very difficult for you to deal with, right? To be able to deal with huge fluctuations in price. So one of the things that Gaius does is he basically caps the price for grain. And it's not crazy low. It's not free or anything like that. But what this ensures is that during difficult times, right? During difficult times, regular people can still buy grain at kind of a normal price, and they don't have to worry about those huge fluctuations. We're going to see this taken to the extreme later on. Later on when we get, Roman emperors and stuff like that, Augustus, he looks back at this and he's like, that was a great idea. The only better thing would be if people didn't have to pay for grain at all. And so they're totally looking back and stealing Gaius's idea here. he starts coming up with some ideas about how to reform the army, right? A big part, remember, of that land reform bill, a big part of the land reform bill was the fact that, like, people needed land to be in the army. And Gaius hasn't totally changed that, but he's starting to do some other things to help people out. So, for one, he's letting the government give people weapons and money, right? And then they kind of like take that back a little bit from like wage deductions. But prior to this, you had to be wealthy enough, not just to own land, but to be able to equip yourself, right? You had to be able to fund your own armor and your own weapons and all that stuff to be a part of the army. And Gaius is like, I guess that's great if you can afford it, but like, we need people to fight, and we should probably start supporting that. So having the government equip the soldiers and then take back some of the cost of that through wage deductions is one way that he kind of helped people join the army. The other thing that he does is he sets a minimum draft age. So prior to this, you could actually go into the army pretty young, and I guess he and some other people thought that was a little messed up, and so he sets this minimum draft age of 17 to be part of the army. Okay, so far, right, we've got Gaius moving forward, right, with the land reform thing. We've got him building roads to get markets connected, to get people to come to Rome to vote. We've got him setting the price for grain. He comes up with the idea of wanting to found a colony, right? So remember Carthage? Remember how they like salted the earth? And, there was like never going to be anything there again. Gaius Gracchus is like the first guy to be like, that was an awesome place for a city. Let's build something there. It doesn't happen yet, but he's the one who to first kind of raised the idea. And he does found colonies down in southern Italy, right? So he's explicitly founding Roman colonies. And then he starts trying to reform the legal process. So one of the huge kind of problems Rome was having, right? Remember, they conquered all these areas. And one of the problems with this is that it goes back to taxation practices. Now, I know this sounds really boring, all right? Stick with me here. Stick with me here. We're going to talk taxes for a second. I know it sounds boring. It's tax season, so maybe it's relevant that way. But here's how Roman taxes worked in the provinces in the early days, okay? So the way it worked is that the person kind of in charge of the province was required to provide a certain amount of money to Rome, right? Rome would set an amount that they thought was a reasonable amount of taxes from a certain region, right? Part of Spain, or, Gaul on this side of the Alps, or Macedon. And they'd say, we need whatever, 50,000 denarii, right? Or something like that. And then what ends up happening is that the governor, right, or the person in charge of the tax collection, they go to collect the taxes, but there's not a set rate. The governor just collects as much taxes as he can. And whatever he gets on top of whatever's required to go to Rome, he gets to keep. So the incentives are super messed up here, right? The incentive is for the governor to just extract as much money as possible from the people while he's in office there, right? Give Rome its part and then keep the rest for himself. And so this, it kind of led to all sorts of exploitation, and sometimes these people were put on trial because of their actions. But what ended up happening in the early days is that the people who made up the jury for those trials were just their senatorial friends, right? And so what Gaius Gracchus does is he says, that's messed up, right? Like, we can't just have people's friends trying them and then letting them off the hook. So he makes it kind of illegal to have senatorial friends as part of the jury for a senator when they go on trial for extortion and exploiting the people of the provinces. Now, again, when you think about this, right? On the one hand, you describe it like that and you're like, this guy's awesome. Like, what a good dude fighting for the regular people. And then you think about it from another perspective and you're like, but maybe he's just trying to bring down the Senate and reduce their power to elevate his own status. Again, you can look at it kind of both ways. Then he starts thinking of other things. He's like, all right, well, we've got all these allies. Remember when we looked at the thing with Municipia and allies and Latin allies and Italian allies and Roman allies, like different sorts of kind of ways that Rome has brought in different cities under Roman control? Well, a lot of those people don't have the right to vote. And Gaius starts thinking, okay, there are all these people out there. They tend to be part of the lower classes, right? What if I were the one to give them the right to vote? Maybe they would all vote for me and what I want. And so he starts proposing this legislation that all these different Italian allies would be given the right to vote. The senators are very, very opposed to this because this is a bunch more kind of regular people who would likely vote against senatorial or aristocratic interests. And at this point, right, they start to kind of brand Gaius Gracchus as this demagogue, right? As somebody who doesn't care about the rules, who's just trying to get all the people on his side and then do whatever he wants to maintain and spread his power. Okay, so Gaius Gracchus actually does get a second term as tribune of the plebs, right? So he rules in 123, he gets elected again for 122, and then he tries to run again for a third term in a row in 121. And at this point in time, the Senate is basically like, they declare him an enemy of the state. There's a thing called the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, and they throw this against Gaius, and they're like, this guy is not some hero of the people. He is trying to become the most powerful person in Rome, right, and get power for himself. And he remembers what happened to his brother. He sees the mob coming for him, and he retreats to the Aventine Hill, the hill that's always been the hill of the people. The Palatine is for the kind of aristocrats. The Aventine is for the regular people. And there he commits suicide, kind of ending his rule as tribune and his rise to power. Now, in later times, the Gracchi, right, centuries later, the Gracchi are remembered as heroes of the Roman Republic, right? They are thought of by later Romans as people who really did fight for the regular person. But historians have also taken this other perspective that perhaps that wasn't their main goal, and the senators at the time certainly thought that that was not the main goal. They thought at the time the main goal was to gain as much power as they could for themselves. Now, all of this is exemplifying a larger trend towards more power in single individuals. And that's going to become problematic. Remember, the guiding ideology of the Republic was no more kings in Rome, right? But we see more and more power coming in to a single individual. All right, so we talked about this, right? We talked about the populares, the regular people, and the optimates, the rich people, and that's where the clash is happening. Now, the Gracchi, they were very, very clearly in the populares camp. And we can look at this to see kind of what the different groups did, all right? So the populares, the people kind of who fell into that group, use the Gracchi strategy moving forward, right? They like the idea of taking things straight to the people. They're like, we don't need the Senate, we're taking it straight to the people. They would often try to gain favor and power by looking for groups that were, disenchanted, right? For some sort of reason, right? It could be people without particular legal rights or economic status or something like that, but they'd find those groups and think, what can we do for those groups to get them on our side? And this is actually, the term originated as a kind of derogatory term by the optimates, talking about how these people would pander, right, to the masses. Now, the optimates, on the other hand, they were the ones who, kind of like the patricians, would rely on these traditional political tools, right? The Senate held a lot of sway. They wanted to maintain the kind of traditional way of taking things by the Senate. Family reputation and being able to trace your family back to the earliest days of Rome was very, very important for the Optimates. And it would often be through personal aristocratic alliances that connections were made and power was held and built up, rather than through pandering to the masses. So in some ways, right, in some ways you can kind of map this on to modern politics, right? And frequently it would feel like, like the populares might map on to the Democrats who want to give out social programs to those who are less fortunate, right? Whereas the Optimates are more of like an every man for himself sort of thing that might map onto the Republicans. But it's not really, really like that. We got to remember that all these groups are upper class to begin with, right? It's not like they're poor people rising up who have nothing and then become one of the populares leaders. These are all upper class people. They're just adopting different strategies to try to gain kind of power within Rome. All right, so we've talked about the Gracchi as some of the important populares leaders, right? And now we get to the kind of guy who's even more powerful than them. This guy, Gaius Marius, we'd just call him Marius. The people's general. He is one of the main populares leaders. Now, he comes to power in something known as the Jugurthine War. And Jugurtha is this general in North Africa, and he's a Numidian general. He's actually related a couple generations after that guy Massinissa, who had a role in the Third Punic War because Carthage broke their treaty with Massinissa, who was allied to Rome. Anyway, we got this guy Jugurtha. He's causing problems from Rome in North Africa, right, near old Carthage. And this gets Rome embroiled in that battle, and Marius is sent down. And he's actually pretty smart at the beginning here, right? He weasels his way into the army down here. He gets the old general kicked out, and then he gets himself established as the new general in that area. Now, Marius, when you look at his background, he's what's known as a novus homo. And what this means is that it means like new man. It translates literally as new man. And what it means is that he's the first person in his family to become the consul, right? You might think of it as like a nouveau riche or something like that, where it's like he doesn't quite have the same familial legacy as some of the other important families in Rome. And as a result, he's going to do things that, again, focus on the regular people. Now, his big thing, right, if you look at all of Marius's reforms, we talked through Gracchus's earlier, but if you look at Marius's, his big thing is the army, right? What he does is he takes the Roman army and the way it was, where it's this kind of citizen militia, right, that provides their own land and armor and all that stuff and comes together when necessary. And he's like, look at us, we own half the Mediterranean. We need a professional army. So that's what Marius does, right? He takes the Roman army and he makes it a professional army. First thing he does is he says, it's all right if you don't have land, right? And think about how many more people you can recruit if that's no longer a requirement. No land, and you're still fine. Rome, we will give you armor and weapons, right? You are going to work for us for a long period of time, and it's not going to be something where you're in the army sometimes and farming sometimes. This is a job now, right? This is what you do for your career. And then after you finish, right, after you finish your term of 25 years, you're going to get land and you're going to get citizenship, which are pretty awesome retirement benefits. So the army is a very, very attractive career now. The requirements, the kind of heavy requirements for joining it have been greatly reduced. It becomes kind of more powerful than it ever had been before. One of Marius's big things, the reason it says Marius's mules here, is that what he does is he trains people by making each person carry everything that they personally need on their back all the time, right? So their tent and like cooking supplies and food. And it's just like an incredibly heavy amount of stuff that each person has to carry. And so that's why they get this name, Marius's mules. Okay, so Marius is able to defeat Jugurtha, although one of his lieutenants actually helps in this process, this guy Lucius Cornelius Sulla, who we'll hear about later on. Anyway, Marius defeats Jugurtha, and then goes in to start conquering Rome's other enemies. So the Romans had been they'd been fighting against the Germanic tribes very unsuccessfully for a number of years leading up to Marius's time as consul and leader of the Roman army. And so they lose to him in 109, 106, 105. One of the big ones in 105, it's tens of thousands of Romans who are killed in this thing. And Marius comes through, and with his new army, right, and with his new legions, he takes care of these Germanic tribes, the Cimbri and the Teutones, and they are throwing Marius all sorts of triumphs. Now, Marius also starts to do this thing that the Gracchi had kind of done with the tribunate, where he's like, hey, we're embroiled in these long-term battles. It's the consul who leads the army in battle. Look how successful I am leading people in battle. Perhaps you should keep electing me consul. And this is another thing that wasn't quite illegal, but there's supposed to be a minimum amount of time between consulships, which he kind of gets rid of. And then he's just elected consul again, and again, and again, and again, and again. And all of a sudden he's elected consul 7 times. And you're starting to think that, again, this is starting to look kind of like I guess he's being elected, so it's not quite a kingship, but it's certainly not that original idea of the Republic where you can only rule for 1 year and then you're replaced by somebody else and you're evenly sharing power. Question in the chat. Was the standard army enlistment 25 years, or was that just for retirement benefits? I believe that if you were doing this as a career, I think if you're doing it as a career, and somebody might want to double check this, it's either 20 or 25 years as the standard kind of enrollment thing in order to get benefits. So I think that was the standard, but you might want to double check that for me and report back if that's not the case. Now, one of the things that ends up happening with Marius is that he's great at leading the army, and he kind of stinks at actually governing. He's great at conquering, he stinks at governing. And once he's out of people to kind of fight, he's having trouble finding land for his veterans, right? All these people he promised all these great retirement benefits to, he's having trouble doing that. He kind of falls out of favor. And his lieutenant, that guy Sulla, who was kind of trying to take credit for the whole thing against Jugurtha, is starting to call Marius a not very good dude. At one point in time, there are these tribunes that are tribunes while Marius is the consul, who end up killing all their rivals. This is like martial law. They're just doing whatever they want. Marius isn't doing anything to stop it. And people are really starting to kind of question his ability to rule. Okay, so let's go ahead and do attendance really quickly here. So we've got attendance quiz number 27, March 31st. The answer is blue for today, so go ahead and put in blue. And then we will quickly talk through this guy, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, and then you're out of here until a week from today. So let's go through just the last few minutes. I want to talk a little bit about Sulla. So Marius is the people's general. Sulla is one of these optimates. He comes from the long, proud, like very, very early historical family of the Cornelia in Rome. So they can trace their lineage way back to the earliest days of Rome. And he's elected consul in 88, right? So we're now into the kind of early part of the 1st century BC. And he starts working his way up the ladder. Again, he's one of the lieutenants of Marius during the Jugurthine War. And in the aftermath of that war, he starts taking credit for all this. He's like, I'm the one who actually brokered the treaty between Rome and this other guy, Bocchus, who like has a role to go with the whole thing against Jugurtha. You don't need to remember the exact details there, but remember that Sulla is having no problem saying that he is actually the one who was responsible for Rome's victory in that war. Now, what he tries to do is Marius and Sulla both try to get the kind of right to go to war against this guy right here, Mithridates of Pontus. So Pontus is way out here, right, in eastern modern-day Turkey. And Mithridates, like, this is a long lineage from one of those successors of Alexander, right? So Rome's like conquered a bunch of this stuff already, and he's kind of the next big guy, right? So this is going to be a prestigious victory for whoever gets to go against him. And not only that, but he's headed out against the Romans. There's this one day in 88 BC called the Vespers of 88, where he coordinates this attack on all Romans in his kind of region. On the very same day, he has people kill them all. Bunch of people killed. So Marius and Sulla both kind of go to war with each other for the right to fight this guy. Now, Sulla eventually wins this, all right, and goes off to fight Mithridates. So in 88, Sulla's elected consul. He goes off to fight Mithridates. That's fine. But then what happens is Marius takes his army while Sulla is gone and marches on the city of Rome. Right? So Marius takes his army, marches on the city of Rome, and then Sulla has to take his army and march back on the city of Rome. So what we're seeing now, right, is that both of these leaders have taken their armies and used them in a way that's very, very untraditional, not only to fight like Mithridates, right, the foreign enemy, but they're starting to use them as like pawns in this political game to fight each other. So Marius marches on Rome in 87, and he's reinstalled as consul, but he ends up dying in office, natural causes, doesn't die in battle. And when Sulla comes back, he's kind of coming up to Rome that's full of supporters of Marius, and there's a huge battle outside the walls, the Battle of the Colline Gate. And now what we have is we have a Roman army returning from the east, fighting another Roman army for control of Rome. Like, things have really devolved here. This is bad, right? A Roman army coming back from being victorious, fighting another Roman army outside the city of Rome. And Sulla wins that battle, and what he does afterwards is he comes up with this list of names known as the proscriptions. And these were originally people who fought against him in the battle that he considered enemies of the state. And that list grew and grew and grew. And you can imagine how people use this sort of list, right? Say you want your neighbor's land. Maybe you just tell Sulla that that guy was a big supporter of Marius. And maybe his name makes it onto the list. And if your name's on the list, you are an enemy of Rome, and anybody can do you harm. And they're actually obligated to do you harm if they see you. So things have gotten bad. We will continue this story next week with Julius Caesar. Again, no class Friday, a asynchronous lecture on Monday. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, everyone, and I will see you back here on Wednesday. It does sound like the Red Scare. Yes, very good parallel there. All right, have a great week, everybody. It's good seeing you.